element in the overall hierarchy, very near the capstone of the elite, or what I earlier called the incunabula. The Great White Brotherhood was seen as a means to bring occult or secret information to the planet, and it was designed to balance the movement of secularization, which was to essentially rid the planet of religion and bring science to the stage. 15 was not sufficiently convinced to make a break from the incunabula and the Great White Brotherhood. He preferred to view LERM as proof of God and leave his world intact. This is not, by the way, an uncommon reaction to this information, and intellects, as brilliant as 15's, will make this choice to stay in the known world instead of venturing to the unknown. In 15's case, he had too much to lose.
Why did the elite want to get rid of religion?
First, I want to correct you on your choice of words. It isn't the elite, as most people think of them. The vast majority of the elite are corporate citizens, financial managers, government managers, political heavyweights, military commanders, and the like. They are not making these decisions. The vast majority have no idea who or what the agenda is. That's why I refer to it as the capstone of the elite. These are ones who have been preparing the world for Anu's return. Now, back to your question. Religion was seen as an obstacle to the one world order. The quantum world of science was flexing its muscles, disproving key elements of religious doctrine, and it would, if left unmanaged, verify the hologram, but not the deception. The Great White Brotherhood was launched to the public in the 1950s, just as the quantum world was beginning to signal its stature, but it goes back to the 18th century when it was referred to as the Council of Light, and even before that it was a concept held in many secret societies. The idea of ascended masters, communicating with one another telepathically, and instructing and guiding the affairs of men, gained some popularity with those who were disenchanted with organized religion. To be fair, some of the channeled information did come from beings that were considerably more informed than the average man, and they could bedazzle most people with their superior knowledge of the cosmological order and the structure of things relative to God, but their description and explanation was founded in the hologram of deception, while these masters supposedly channeled the secret or hidden knowledge to their selected students, who then wrote books and created organizations. This information continued to separate the worlds of light and dark, good and evil, and those in the know from those who were not. They use words like love, ascension, truth, and God more liberally than organized religions, and God was always portrayed as a loving, congealing force. Angels and cosmic beings were also associated with these organizations. They not only appropriated symbols and constructs like the soul and eternal life, but they also created a ladder of consciousness that stretched into infinity, in which the student was forever trying to learn more to progress higher on the ladder. The elevation of one over another. This was the key concept of the separation tactic of the Great White Brotherhood, and frankly, all secret societies. Create divisions of knowledge, add a ritual or two, and promise more power and awareness as you, the student, walk the path. They don't talk about how to deprogram from separation, instead they reinforce it.
You've shared information in previous interviews about the central race. In my notes, you even said they were responsible for our DNA. Are they the Anunnaki?
No. No, you have to define DNA in two ways. One is the human instrument or body, emotions and mind system, and that stems from one system of DNA, courtesy of the Anunnaki and Syrians mostly. The second is the infinite being inside the human instrument, which is also based on DNA, which is the quantum blueprint of the sovereign integral consciousness. The latter is the DNA developed by the central race.
In the second interview you made some pretty big claims about the 7 sides of the Wingmakers being a defensive weapon, and that this somehow related to the individual's experience of the Wingmakers materials. In light of this disclosure tonight, can you explain how this works?
The entire import of the Wingmakers disclosure is about the sovereign integral, and how humanity benefits when the state of consciousness is seated within the human expression. The requirement to keep this disclosure in the realm of science fiction and mythology was why I mentioned this defensive weapon.
So you're saying this was just a story?
That part was. You see, the Wingmakers materials are, by design, composed of many strands of information. Some strands are storytelling, some are artistic, some are spiritual, some are conspiratorial, and some are designed to be factual, coherent disclosures of what is really happening in our world. The strands of the storytelling encase the other strands. In a way, they shield these inner strands. I've already explained why it happened this way, And while some might feel it would be easier to just give the facts, if these facts were disclosed now, you would not have seen, heard or read this information. The Wingmaker's materials would have been censored or taken down and discredited. I'm sure there'll be a good dose of that anyway. When and if this interview is released, but the story strand was necessary to provide an acceptable container to release the sovereign integral process.
But this concerns me that the information you've provided in the previous 4 interviews is created, at least in part, as a story. How do I present it to any reliable news source as true?
You can't.
So then, what do I do with it?
Either you will release it as a story, or I will. If you prefer not to, I understand.
Couldn't you just tell me what parts are story, and what parts are true?
I could, but this isn't how I've been asked to release the information.
But I've invested a lot of time in this already, and if I invest my reputation as well, then I need to focus on the true parts. Otherwise, I can't substantiate anything when I'm asked if, in my opinion, it's a true story.
Everyone wants to know the absolute truth. They want someone to point to this phrase, or that precept, or that doctrine and explain to them that that is truth. Believe it. That's been the game on this planet ever since humans began to contemplate their universe in a philosophical manner. All the shared truth has gotten us where? Where we kill children to punish leaders. Where leaders lock people up in death camps. Where religious leaders abuse children. So I would ask you, what is the value of the information that has collectively brought humanity here? You want the signposts of truth. No one can do that, and your proof is that no one has.
Why?
Because we are sovereign and we must experience ourselves in this way, and not let others decide what it is we should or shouldn't believe, or what is truth or falsehood. I wish we didn't live in a hologram of deception, but that is our human reality, and whining about it will not change it one iota. Studying the supposed masters of truth will not change it either. I can show you a library of books that expound on esoteric information. Some of these books were written as non-fiction, and by all appearances they seem to be credible and insightful, and yet if you listen carefully to the words, you see how they are separating you from one another. How they define a hierarchy. How they define a soul that is always learning, a human that is always sinning and weak. How they describe a universe that is infinitely layered. How the light illuminates those who follow certain practices. It can be very subtle. They can be talking about oneness, but there are judgments present in the words, or recriminations if you don't execute the practice properly, or suggestions that you don't mix this practice with anything else or it is diminished, or join and promote this path over that one. Part of the sovereign integral process is to practice your discernment of what enables you to believe in you, not the universe or some master or teaching, but you, stripped bare of all of your add-ons, beliefs, thought patterns, fears, guilt, stories, judgments, blames, pretenses, everything that hangs on you from the past. If you could drop them all, everything you have been taught and told and programmed to believe, what would be left to hear? Silence. Deep, clear silence. That is you. When you find that, you will then know that everyone has that, too. Anu does. Lucifer does. Jesus does. Your neighbor does. Your spouse does. Everyone. So what proof do you need to find that? What proof can I show you or tell you to give you that? I can't. I can convey a process that if you follow it, you might find this experience inside you, but that's all. The process is free. It only requires time. The process is not owned by anyone. The process is not part of anything but you. Once you stand at the trailhead of that process, it's yours to follow or reject. Everyone must achieve this realization of oneness and equality in life on Earth. That is our call to action as a species. And in my opinion, anyone or anything that tells you otherwise is lost. One more thing, the story strand may be exactly what activates someone to the sovereign integral process, and I think that was the point that the Wingmakers took with their information. Everything about their work is signaling the individual to the sovereign integral process, and the realization of the grand portal.
If Anu is what we have been taught as God, then who is Lucifer?
It is precisely for this reason that you have to be sovereign. Because in the world where Anu is God, it is easy to presume that Lucifer is the real bearer of light. But remember what I've said over and over. Everyone is lost in this hologram of deception. If all are lost, how can anyone lead you to truth? They can't. The truth is self-expression of your infinite self in the human form upon Earth. That is the closest definition of truth that I know. It may not be the same for you or whoever reads this in the future, but this is my definition of truth. Does Lucifer advocate this? I'm not aware that he does. If anyone is not supporting my truth objective, then why would I let them move me in any other direction, even an inch? You ask who Lucifer is. There are 1,000 ways to answer that question, several of them I already have. To add another definition, he is not a polarity of Anu or his puppet. At the fundamental level he lives in equality and oneness, the same as we. Is he awakened? I don't know. I haven't met him. I haven't talked with him. If I do, my first question of him will be, does he support the freedom of human beings, the kind I have just defined, and if he says yes, then I will accept his word until I see evidence to the contrary. If he says no, I will remove myself from his presence. If he says maybe, I would have a conversation with him and invite him to support this movement. Everyone is waking up. I realize it seems like the activation is in super slow motion, but in 70 to 8 years, a huge shift can occur in humanity's realization of what is really happening in this world. There is no way to hide this. It's already in the unconscious mind layer, and it will continue to spill out until we push the wall down.
This is more a comment or observation than a question, but the sovereign integral process seems existential instead of transcendental. It also seems like a solo journey instead of an organized group who are supporting one another. Is my perception accurate?
Partly, yes. I think the sovereign aspect is what you're picking up on. It's an internal process for the individual to develop within themselves, but the integral aspect is a collective, and I don't mean that as an organizational structure. This process needs to be outside of any organization's or individual's hands. It's not possible to own this or control it within an organizational structure. I think people can use the internet and email to support one another. Some will want this kind of support. Others may prefer to be left on their own. Relative to it being existential, yes, it is that. This isn't about ascending into the high places of heaven and hanging out in perfected realms of space, while your fellow human beings are lost, enslaved and corralled into ever-tightening spaces. This is about sharing the hard virtues and the truth of existence in your behaviors, here, on Earth. It is about making Earth a place where human beings can express their life essence, without the interference of Anu's hardware and market software, and to tear down the external programming that creates the parents of fear and separation, and all of their children attributes, like narcissism and hatred.
If I decide to release this information, do I have to practice it?
No.
Can I have some time to think about this?
How long do you need?
Maybe a week.
Of course. You can take more if you need it.
Are you resigned to the idea that you'll be caught?
I'm a realist. I don't think the ACIO will do anything rash. They'll simply do their best to quarantine me.
What does that mean?
I'll end up in a holding cell, off the grid.
What about Anu?
Anu is simply a name of the royal leader of the Anunnaki race. His name is symbolic of more than one being, which is the capstone of the elite. You could also look at Anu as the programmed existence of the human race. He exists in everyone to some degree. Anu's presentation of himself is that he's omniscient and omnipresent, and this is true in a certain way, so I have to deal with that reality. Everyone who wakes up and practices this process will meet this resistance in some form or other.
But if people hear that they will have to deal with Anu, won't they run from this? Who's going to try and fight that machine?
From the Wingmaker's perspective, thousands, and then hundreds of thousands, and then millions. The wall can collapse in an instant, when a critical mass is achieved.
But won't this be accompanied with hysteria and panic? At one time I thought the Grand Portal was a technological discovery of the soul, and it would be on the internet for all to see and experience in the comfort of their homes. But this isn't like that, is it?
No, this is more like a collapse of reality on a mass scale, where infinite beings suddenly find themselves awake inside a human uniform, and wonder what just happened.
What if it doesn't happen? What if they win, and transhumanism 3.0 is the new human being locked into a world of separatism? What then?
I don't know how to answer that question, other than to say that the information provided by the Wingmakers is a new inception point, which necessarily means a new path. Maybe it will take more time, but it will happen. It has to. We're infinite beings, and this fact cannot be bottled up indefinitely.
I understand, but the whole concept of infinite beings, that's been around a long time. Soul has been around a long time as a concept. How is this any different?
Yes, it's been around a long time, but it's been bottled up into three paths. 1. Reincarnation and karma. 2. Be good and obedient and join the ranks of heaven. And 3. Ascend to a higher plane of existence and eventually become a teacher within the hierarchy. The fourth path, though not about soul, is that we are simply human flesh and blood and we have no soul. The person's soul is construed from one of these paths, assuming you believe you are a soul. Each of these paths, as I have already said, is within a hologram of deception. They do not lead